What we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we welcome you back to our Season 6, Week 10 around the NCAA recap show. Your Panthers were off this week, but still some big games around the country, namely Virginia Tech continuing their domination of everyone that comes before them. A huge victory over Boston College as they stay unbeaten. Also, Syracuse continues their impressive come-from-behind season as they get to bowl eligibility with a 37-34 victory over Louisville. Clemson also escapes Wake Forest 31-20 in probably a closer game than expected, but they still get the win. And Duke gets their second ACC win of the season with a tight victory over Virginia. Around the country, Florida beats Fresno State in a tight battle. They continue to play tight games week in and week out. It feels like Oklahoma escapes with a 28-point fourth quarter. Taylor Savage leads the Sooners to 28 straight points in the fourth as they escape Kansas State 35-28 and improve to 9-0 on the season. Also, we talked about it in the prior week preview. West Virginia playing motivated. They end up knocking off Iowa State 41-28. The Cyclones falling from the ranks of the unbeatens just before they're set to play Oklahoma. Another big upset loss for another undefeated team, Michigan State knocking off Michigan. Jim Harbaugh struggling in those rivalry games year in and year out, it feels like. And Michigan State, it took overtime, but they end up knocking off their heated rivals, the Wolverines, 38-31. Arkansas State, another team that likes to try and burst bubbles every season and try and get into the New Year's Six Bowls, not going to be doing so this year as they lose to South Alabama and potentially might not even win the Sun Belt this year for the first time in quite some time. 35-28 victory there. TC Ford, the Arkansas State quarterback, went out injured. That hurt them. Tennessee loses to Mississippi State. 13 straight points for Mississippi State as the Bulldogs win 27-23. Tennessee, number 2 team in the country, falls. So number 4 lost, number 2 lost. You have an incredible array of teams losing this week. Number 11, UCLA, falls to Colorado 42-26. So a tough year for the Bruins after winning the Pac-12 last year. I doubt they'll be doing that this year. USC beats Arizona. Houston, third straight Big 12 loss as they'll probably fall out of the rankings this week, I'd expect. Giovanni Perry, 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter for the true freshman quarterback, 4 touchdowns overall as Houston wins 34-31, 21-7 victory in the fourth quarter leads to a 34-31 victory overall. Perry, his pass accuracy not great, but he ends up leading Texas to 4 touchdown drives and giving them the victory over Houston in a big, big way. Arkansas escapes against struggling Auburn 24-19 after they beat Ole Miss last week. Cincinnati needed overtime to beat a struggling ECU team, but the Bearcats outlast the Pirates to stay unbeaten 27-24. Ole Miss bounces back with a big victory over Texas A&M. Stanford wins the ranked battle in Autzen Stadium against Oregon 27-14. And Bama, in an instant classic, rides 4 Darion Williams Jr. touchdowns, including 3 in the fourth quarter, to outlast LSU 36-34 in a rare scoring affair in Death Valley. Usually when these two teams meet up, it ends up being a low-scoring affair, but this time Alabama and LSU in a bit of a shootout as Alabama gets the 2-point victory. For your Panthers, it was an off week, but we did get a commit. Allie Patterson from Jeannette, PA, the same high school that produced Terrell Pryor, remember the Ohio State quarterback for the Jeannette Jayhawks. 3-star offensive tackle, great size, 6'7", 317 pounds. Didn't have a ton of interest from really anybody for good reason because he's not a particularly great player. Decent run blocker, but will definitely need some tutelage throughout his career before he'll be a contributor. He may be a lifelong backup, but he keeps that local pipeline going for Pittsburgh area products. We do get to finish scouting a few players as well. Joshua Stover, the tight end, ends up being very, very good. His blocking maybe a little bit better than we expected, but not spectacular. He does have very good catching attributes, good speed for a tight end as well, a big body at 6'5", 247. Excited to see what he can contribute. Probably will redshirt for a season, but he's definitely a guy that looks like a solid performer. We do have pretty much everybody else scouted. Marlon Capps, the Florida outside linebacker product, gets scouted. Disappointing return for him. He's going to be a guy that probably plays closer to the line of scrimmage. Okay speed, okay tackling, but from there on out, he's definitely going to need some improvement before he's able to contribute to the team. But that said, adds depth at a position where we were going to be looking very, very thin heading into next season. As we take a look at our recruiting board, 18 signings already this season, 6 on the offensive side of the football, 12 on the defensive side of the football. You can see where we still have targets potentially on our recruiting board, although not all of them are guys we're actually actively pursuing for the most part, but they are on the recruiting board nonetheless. We do have a couple of big-name defensive players we're still trying to sign. Roderick Golden, the outside linebacker from Pittsburgh. Remember, he went to the same high school as Mac McAlevey. He's a guy we really want to sign, but we do have some steep competition. Notre Dame, Ohio State are among the major players trying to bring him in on the defensive side of the football. That said, we've done a very good job recruiting so far, and we're really looking forward to see a lot of these guys in action last year. You can see 3 defensive ends already signed, 2 defensive tackles, 2 middle linebackers, an outside linebacker, though we do have a few guys still targeted at outside linebacker as well as at cornerback, and a big-name strong safety we're trying to sign as well. It's coming down to us and UCLA for one of the top strong safeties in the country, out of South Carolina. Very excited to see if we're hopefully able to bring him in. So definitely a lot of action still to come on the recruiting board. Really only a couple of big name guys we're still going after, but we are in very, very tight battles as we try and bring those guys to the forefront and to the team. Looking around the country after last week, Dustin Young bounced back with a big performance against Texas A&M, 388 yards passing, 51 rushing for a 6 total touchdown performance that puts his name back into the top of the Heisman conversation. Jacob Jefferson, senior linebacker for UCF, forced a fumble, had a pick in a nice game for the Knights as they knocked off Tulsa. But Dustin Young, the real story of the weekend for his great performance. ACC, though, Travis Huff continuing to impress. 6 touchdown performance, 350 total yards. He's been incredible running the football. He's about almost at 100 yards every game running the ball. His passing's been good, but he's been very, very explosive in keeping other defenses off balance. 6 touchdown performance in the win over Boston College, as it's looking like a 2-horse race for the Heisman this year. D.D. Harris, junior quarterback for Ohio State, very good performance. He struggled passing the football this year in the victory over Rutgers, only 134 yards through the air, but 84 yards on the ground, 5 total touchdowns as the Buckeyes knocked off the Scarlet Knights. Brett Childress, sophomore quarterback for TCU, 4 touchdown performance. Jameel McCarthy, senior left end for Kansas, 2 sacks over in the Big 12. In the American, Cody Pollard, 14 catches, 161 yards, and 2 touchdowns for Temple, as their air raid offense continues to be very impressive. Remember, it almost led them to an upset victory over Pitt earlier in the season. Brandon McDaniel, couple sacks and a pick for UTSA. CJ Matthews, quarterback for UAB, 117 yards on the ground, 232 through the air in a great performance. Ben Guidry, another solid game for the transfer quarterback from UCF who went to Notre Dame in the offseason. Good game for him. Over at Ohio, Jeremy Butler continues to put up incredible games on the ground, 252 yards and 3 touchdowns on 32 carries. You can see he's up to 1,200 yards on the season already and 12 touchdowns after a 19-touchdown, 1,600-yard campaign last year. He's been absolutely incredible as Ohio, after losing their starting quarterback who played against us a couple of seasons ago. I'm blanking on his name right now. But after losing him, they've leaned on that running game, and Butler's been incredible. Tavares Cruz, one of the most improved players in the offseason. Great game for him, 355 yards, 5 touchdown performance for the San Jose State quarterback. Taylor Coleman staying in that Heisman race with another 5 touchdown performance, 298 passing, 72 rushing for the USC quarterback. And like we talked about, Dustin Young with a great performance. Javon Nash, outside linebacker for Arkansas, forced a fumble, recovered a fumble in their victory as well. We look at the Heisman race right now. Travis Huff still top of the board. Dustin Young right behind him. You got Taylor Coleman as well from USC. Those 3 quarterbacks probably your favorites as we head toward the clubhouse on the back stretch of the season. Isaiah Russell, 2 touchdown performance, 160 yards for the Washington halfback to get his name at least in the conversation for an invitation to New York City. But I think it's down to Huff, Young, and Coleman for certain as we look at the Heisman leaderboard. You can see Huff's rushing stats very impressive this year. Young's been very, very good, 27 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 9 rushing touchdowns as well. Not as many yards per game as Travis Huff, but he's got a ton of rushing touchdowns. Taylor Coleman, 30 touchdowns against just 2 interceptions for the senior quarterback for USC. Great job taking care of the football. He's got 6 rushing touchdowns to his name as well. Almost more impressive stats than Dustin Young for the USC signal caller. Jaron Ware over 1,000 yards for Tennessee. this season already. Isaiah Russell, 800 yards, 13 touchdowns for the Huskies. He's been good catching the ball out of the backfield as well. So there's your Heisman race after 10 weeks of the season. Coaches poll, Oklahoma still number 1 in the country. Virginia Tech jumps up to number 2 because, of course, we did see some upsets. Tennessee falls back to number 7 with their loss to Mississippi State. Cincinnati's up to 3. Michigan drops out of the top 10 after their upset loss to their rivals, Michigan State. Pitt gets a benefit from that, jumping up 2 spots to number 10. Alabama from 13 all the way up to number 9 after knocking LSU from the rankings. Michigan falls back to number 11 with their loss to Michigan State. Florida jumps up to 13 after their victory over Fresno. Iowa State back to 15, losing to West Virginia. They're no longer unbeaten, and they'll take on number 1 Oklahoma this week. We got a bunch of ranked battles this week. You can see, looking at this week coming up, so many ranked opponents coming up. Mississippi State jumps into the polls at number 18 after knocking off Tennessee, and they get greeted by number 9 Bama coming up this week. Florida State jumps to number 19. They'll take on Clemson this week. UCLA falls back to number 20 after losing to Colorado. Boston College only drops to 23 after losing to Virginia Tech. Houston back to 24 with their loss to Texas. And Georgia back into the polls despite not playing last week at 5-3. They come in at number 25. Kansas State and Oregon falling out. Virginia Tech, they're looking like almost a shoe-in to the ACC Coastal Division title. They have UNC this week is really the game that's going to decide things for them because they'll have UVA in their final conference game of the season. They have 2 non-conference games before that. Tough game against Georgia and then East Carolina. But if they can beat UNC this week, then it's pretty much done and dusted because it'll be very, very tough for Virginia to upset the Hokies and knock them to a single loss. And in that case, they'd still have the tiebreakers over Pitt, Miami, and North Carolina with head-to-head wins. So Virginia Tech can actually clinch the Coastal this week if they can knock off North Carolina. All the other Coastal teams will be rooting for the Tar Heels to have an opportunity to potentially win it. Florida State, Clemson will face each other this week. The winner will have inside track at the Atlantic, but Syracuse does still have both Clemson, Florida State, and Boston College on their schedule the remainder of the way. So technically, Syracuse does control their own destiny. If they can win out, they'll have head-to-head wins against all the other top ACC Atlantic Division teams and could still win the conference title or the Atlantic Division title in that regard. But they'll start things off with an easy game against Wake Forest before they get into the big matchups. But for the ACC, the real big games this week, UNC, Virginia Tech, and Clemson, Florida State. Those are 2 games that will decide the leaderboard in the Atlantic and Coastal divisions. Virginia Tech, of course, been incredible this year. One of the top defenses in the country, top offense in the country. UNC's offense has been incredible. Their defense, conversely, has been very, very weak. So I think this will be an offensive shootout. You'd have to lean Virginia Tech in this matchup just because of the fact that the Hokies have been so good on both sides of the football. But I like UNC to put up some points here. Their pass offense with Zach Anderson, the Michigan transfer, has been very, very good. They got Sam O'Donnell at halfback as well, who's fantastic. I think they're going to put up points and at least keep things close with Virginia Tech. Clemson against Florida State. Clemson and Florida State both have so much talent that you never really know who's going to win. I think if you had to go on balance of who's been better week in and week out, you'd probably lean Florida State. But they've been prone to turning the football over. -6 turnover differential. Clemson, one of the best at controlling the football, +5 turnover differential. I think if there's a difference to be made that could give Clemson the victory, you can see Herb Street likes the Tigers. I think it'll be on ball safety and ball control. If Clemson can protect the football and take it away from Florida, I like them to win this game. Oklahoma against Iowa State. Of course, the Cyclones have been an upstart this season, leaning on their great quarterback play from Michael Robinson. But they're taking on an Oklahoma team that looks like an absolute juggernaut right now. Number 1 defense, which you don't typically see in the Big 12. Number 4 offense, both in yardage and scoring. The Sooners have to win this one, I think, no matter what. Penn State taking on Michigan. Of course, Penn State 5-0 in Big Ten play. Michigan was 5-0, just lost to Michigan State last week. Herb Street likes the Wolverines to bounce back. Their pass offense has been so good. The Penn State pass defense has been fairly porous. I think that could be the difference in the game. Steve Tate airing it out, leading the Wolverines to a victory. Arizona State, UCLA. We got South Carolina, Florida. Some definitely big conference games going on this week. A few non-conference as well, but for the most part, the conference games are the ones to keep an eye on. USC 6-1 in conference, Stanford 6-1 in conference. This is a game that really could decide the Pac-12 championship picture. USC, probably surprisingly not as talented as Stanford, which usually you don't say that most seasons, but the big difference for the Trojans, I think, will be the fact that Stanford's pass defense is number 110 in the country, and Taylor Coleman has been airing the ball out week in and week out. I like the Trojans in this one. And then Bama, still with a possibility, if they can get some games to go in their favor, to make the SEC championship game, and who knows, sneak into the college football playoff to try and defend their title. They're taking on a Mississippi State team that's been very good this year. They like to run the football, as is Alabama. This is going to be one of the quickest games, I think, in college football this season because both teams love to run the football. I like Bama in this one, though. And finally, Thursday night football contest on ESPN. Nice little national broadcast under the lights in Atlanta. The Panthers taking on Georgia Tech and their former head coach, Randy Bates. So he does know a bit about this Pitt offense. I think that'll help Georgia Tech as they try and slow down the Panthers. But Pitt has so many weapons right now, and their offense is a bit different than it's been in the past. Of course, Kenny Pickett last year, great thrower. The football was mobile, but not to the level that C.J. Kirk is. I think Virginia Tech is going to have to do similar to what other teams have done against the Panthers, hope for some turnovers and try and capitalize on those if they want to win this football game. C.J. Kirk, though, great to see. He's finally got a positive TD to INT ratio, 16 TDs against 14 INTs. Davion Reynolds hitting 100 yards in a game there last week, and Jay Key's doing what he does, 5 catches and a touchdown for the Panthers. It's been a very good offensive showing against Virginia, and they'll hope to replicate the way they played last week here coming up against the Yellow Jackets, a team that struggled this year. You can see they got off to a horrific start, 5 straight losses. Ole Miss blew them out. Florida State blew the doors off them. Syracuse blew the doors off them before they've started keeping things close. They kept Virginia Tech within 7 points. Then UNC blew them out. It's been a tough go for the Yellow Jackets. I don't think there's much expectation for them to give the Panthers a game other than the fact that Randy Bates, their head coach, is familiar with the Panthers from being their defensive coordinator for the last few seasons. Devron Tucker will miss the game for the Yellow Jackets, their starting center, but they should have a good backup there to help fill in. And when you look at their team, they do have a few good players. Paris Williams, the wide receiver, is a fantastic player. He'll be playing at the next level for sure because he's been very impressive, a 4-year starter at wide receiver for the Yellow Jackets, started in the slot, moved to the outside, and he's been very, very good. And they have some talent. They're not completely devoid of talent. Their running back, Henry's very, very good player. Scott Brown, the sophomore quarterback, he's not a great runner, but he is a decent thrower. He's got a big body, a good arm, 13 TDs against 9 INTs. Needs to protect the football a little bit better, but he's still a good player. There's no doubt about that. So I think he can at least give the Panthers some trouble with some of the weapons he does have on the outside. Phil Henry, running back, I think he's a guy that this year's been good. Next year, he's going to be even better. That's a big thing with Georgia Tech. They're a team that when you look a year in advance, I think they could be very, very good next season for sure. Henry will be a year better if he stays and doesn't go to the draft. Scott Brown's a very, very good player as well, and I think that'll really help them out. Paris Williams at receiver is fantastic. That's the only shame that they're going to miss out on him. He's had a little bit of a down year this year. Last year he was fantastic, 45 catches, 15 yards a catch. Down year this year, but there's no denying that he has some good talent. John Montgomery's a guy to watch in the slot. The sophomore out of Georgia is quick. He can get open. He's a very good player. Otherwise, they have some talent, not a ton of speed, but they're still very, very solid at the wide receiver position, that's for sure. And with the skill players that Georgia Tech has, they do have some opportunity to create some mismatches on the Panthers. A couple of good tight ends, that's areas where the Panthers have struggled in pass coverage from time to time. I think that, Georgia Tech, especially with their line, pretty decent. Chris Banks is going to be a potential NFL player. He's just a junior right now, very good player. Cody Church is going to fill in at center, and he's still a solid player playing for Devron Tucker. Corey Washington's just a sophomore. Terry Fernandez is just a sophomore. You see that team and you go, they're very, very young. Of course, they'll be losing Paris Williams going into next year, but beyond him, pretty much everybody on their offense is returning for next year. If they can add a couple more playmakers at wide receiver in the recruiting period, they're going to be very, very good. They will lose a couple of guys defensively. Justin Clark's a good player in the middle of the defense, but they have some good defensive ends that are coming up. Ryan Griffin, as a sophomore, is a very good player at defensive tackle. Linebackers where the question marks begin. Kyle Green, the freshman, is going to be very good, but Sanders is a senior. Of course, he'll be leaving after the season. He's very, very fast, good in coverage, as is Matt West. Good speed there for a youngster. So they do have a lot of speed all over the field, which is an area where they could give the Panthers trouble because Pitt, They have a couple of speedsters, but not a ton. Paul Lease is fast, Davion Reynolds is fast, but beyond that, the Panthers don't have a ton of guys to stretch the field. Benjamin Ogden was expected to be a big deep threat, but he hasn't done that so much this year. He did have a 30-yard catch last week and has made a few plays for the Panthers, had a good long touchdown against Virginia Tech as well. But beyond that, he's not been particularly impressive. And so Georgia Tech, when you look, they have some young corners. They're going to be motivated. They have good speed. They should stay with the Pitt receivers. And if they can trouble C.J. Kirk, remember, he was only 14 for 25 passing last week. He's been a little bit lower in completion percentage. They can create some, difficult situations for the Panthers, no doubt about it, and at least keep things interesting in that regard. One player's been very good for them, Eric Herring, their strong safety, is a solid player. They're definitely going to miss him moving into next season. But Willie Clark, the kicker, not been very good this year, 4 for 9. Hopefully that'll help the Panthers out, save them a few points. But Georgia Tech's a decent team. Of course, playing at home Thursday night, they're going to be amped up. That's going to at least create a little bit of a tougher matchup for the Panthers, but it should be a game that's going to be a lot of fun. So as always, guys, huge matchups this week. So many ranked battles. Oklahoma's in a big ranked battle with Iowa State. Bama, Mississippi State. Let me know who's going to win some of those games. Give me a score prediction for your Pitt Panthers taking on Georgia Tech. And we're pretty excited to get into this game. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Clemson, Florida State, Virginia Tech, UNC. Who wins those games? Let me know. We'll see you soon. Hail to Pitt. Take care. Bye-bye.